Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. It's 11. I'll just pop my camera on. Hopefully you can see me. Brilliant. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is getting up to speed with real time in ArcGIS. It's great to see so many of you on the call today. We're really excited to show you a variety of different demos, all relating to real time. So before we get started, as always, some housekeeping. So the webinar today is live, but we are also recording it. So we'll be sharing the recording to this webinar in the follow-up email. Also in that follow-up email, we're going to have lots of useful resources relating to the topics that we're going to be showing today. So we'll be sharing those with you as well. As I mentioned at the start as well, for those who had already joined, we've got a Q&A at the end of today's session. So please do feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout Slido. You can see the details for joining on the right-hand side there. They're also scattered throughout our slides, so don't worry if you don't join straight away. But please do make use of the upvote feature on the questions. So we're going to get through as many as we can at the end of the session. But if you see questions that you're interested in, make use of that upvote feature, upvote function, and we'll get to those as a priority. Also in the Slido session, we've got some polls at the end of the webinar. So these are some feedback polls, and we'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to fill those out. We really do use that feedback to kind of look at the future and shaping of these webinars and the topics of these webinars as well. So it would be really great to hear from you. But just before we get on with some demos, firstly, I just wanted to introduce everyone who's joining me on the call today. So firstly, hello, I'm Claudia Hodgson. I'm a GIS consultant in our product communications team here at Esri UK, and I'll pass over to Nikita.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Yes, my name is Nikita, and I am the pre-sales consultant in the GIS consultant in the pre-sales team here.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben, and I'm a GIS consultant in the product communications team here at Esri UK.
And morning everyone, I'm Ryan and I'm a consultant, but I work mostly in the transport, commercial and AEC sectors.
Brilliant, thank you guys. I think we'll all turn our cameras off so that showing you the demos, you can see them in all their glory so that you can see the screen. So let's get straight into it. But just before I hand over to Nikita and Ben, who are going to show you some of the exciting demos, we first really wanted to ask the question, what is real time? So it's a term obviously we use a lot, as in the title of today's webinar. Maybe you use it a lot as well, but what does it actually mean to you? Does it mean just simply being able to monitor a moving point along a network, so seeing a point moving along your map? Or maybe is real time to you ensuring the safety of your mobile workers and knowing their live location and status while they're out in the field? Or maybe rapid alerting is what real time means to you, being able to get that instant feedback and that instant alerting based on the live location or status of an asset on parameters that you've set previously. Or could it be environmental monitoring and being able to actually see live conditions of an event as it's happening? Really, kind of what I'm saying here, there's endless different use cases for real time. And so for each of us on the call today, it may mean something slightly different for each of you. But the reason there are so many different use cases for real time is because we have an increasingly growing access to real time data. And this is because, as we're all getting generally more and more digital, and we're seeing a much sharper uptake of Internet of Things, or what we call IoT sensors. And these sensors are what are collecting that real-time data. But what kind of sensors are we talking about here? What kind of things could it be? Well, frankly, it could be a whole host of different things. It could be sensors on vehicles, such as cars, boats, or planes. It could be sensors on smartphones or smart gadgets that we're carrying around every day, or even smart watches that we wear on our wrists. It could be for sensors used in environmental monitoring, like monitoring soil conditions, air quality, or river gauges. Or for some, you might even have smart tracking collars on your furry friends. Now, these are just some examples, but the extent of IoT sensors are really, they're kind of popping up everywhere, and each of these sensors are continuously collecting data. They're detecting changes in whatever environment it's in. And it's this rapid increase in IoT sensors which is massively expanding really the library of GIS data that we can get access to and that we can work with in ArcGIS. So it's a really exciting thing at the moment in real time. And we can categorize all of these different ways that you may want to work with ArcGIS into some kind of broad categories. You might simply want to collect and get access to data, real-time data with ArcGIS. You might want to ingest data, your own, whether that's your own real-time or whether it's ingesting open data feeds. Or perhaps you want to be able to just visualize that real-time data that you've already got on a map in your ArcGIS. Or maybe wanting to take things further and you're wanting to carry out actually in-depth analysis on your live data as it's coming in to get that real-time analysis of a certain event or a certain asset. So whether you're wanting, it might be you just want one of these capabilities or you want all of them to build a complete real-time workflow, we have a variety of different ArcGIS products to support whatever extent of real-time that is that you need. So for collecting data, you can see a few different options. With ArcGIS, you can get access to a number of readily available live feeds in the Living Atlas, or you could even create your own with the location sharing capabilities that are available in ArcGIS mobile apps. Now, both of those Nikita is going to be showing us in just a moment. And then moving along into ingest, we also have a few different options for how you can actually bring in real-time feeds into ArcGIS to be able to actually create an output which can be shown and visualized on a map. Now, for today's webinar, we will be focusing on ArcGIS Velocity, both showing how to ingest feeds, but also showing the analysis capabilities that it holds. We'll start with quite a simple example of an analytic in Velocity, and we'll then kind of step things up and really showcase what's possible with analyzing in ArcGIS Velocity. So I'm now going to hand over to Nikita, who's going to show us firstly some of the collect capabilities in real time in ArcGIS. So Nikita, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much, Claudia. Let's take a look at real time, really. But the first question that Claudia has mentioned is, well, what does real time mean to you? Because to some people, real time just means getting the updates to the data as soon as they come through. And those updates don't necessarily have to be in the form of a constant stream of data or something that changes every couple of seconds. It can just be some edits that are happening. And if you wanted to have this overview and get those records coming in, get those updates coming in, what you could begin with, something that you already have access to, is something called a joined view layer. And it works like a join, like a very common join that joins two features together, joins two layers together based on a common field. And as soon as edits come in through one layer, you get to see it reflected in all of the other data that it is joined to. And that's an easy way of getting started. But where do those edits come from? Well, those edits may come from mobile applications. Now, some of you may know that we have a whole host of mobile applications. We have Quick Capture for very simple data collection, Survey 123 for form-based data collection. We also have field maps for more map-oriented collection. And in this case, for example, we have a surveyor going out to collect public rights of way. And instead of having to entirely draw by hand their path and the public right of way, what you just saw happening is them turning on the streaming function. This app can take your live location and stream that as eventually a line. What the surveyor is able to do is just walk along collecting their location, and in the end, it creates a line, which is then you can attach information to, you can attach photos, videos, and there we go. As you can see on the screen, we have collected our public right-of-way, and that's part one. Another capability that can happen within a mobile application is something called location sharing. Your field worker will have the option of turning on location sharing if you have allowed them to do so in the map. And this way, they're able to let you know where they are, if they are being safe, if they are still moving around, especially if they're a lone worker. So that's another option of getting started with real-time information quite quickly, because these are capabilities that you have access to. What we can also start looking at is something a little bit closer to a real-time data stream. The question, of course, frequently arises of where do I even get that? And as always, at Esri, we recommend go visit the Living Atlas. If you've never used the Living Atlas before, it is a curated data library of data from our partners, from government agencies. We check it, we'll make sure that it's up to date. And also, in our case, there is also a library of live feeds. Some of those feeds you may see on the screen, they are USA oriented, but some of those feeds are worldwide. Some of those feeds will be UK centered as well. So an easy way to get started and to start making use of this live data is using the Living Atlas. Imagine, for example, a weather feed for the UK. Imagine combining that with the live location of your field workers and being able to let them know that they have some very bad weather incoming while they're out in the field, making sure that they're staying safe. And as Claudia mentioned, we also have your own IoT sensors. So Internet of Things is permeating our world at an incredible pace, even to the point where we can map buildings and we can add sensors inside buildings. And these sensors, in this example, showing us the temperature inside every room. We can make sure that everything is functioning as it should. We can also combine this with sensors that tell us whether there's somebody in the room, so we can turn heating off inside the room. We can mix and match, which gets us actually into, from the collect side of things, into the ingestion and the analyzing of data. Now, as Claudia mentioned, we will be using Velocity. It's a really convenient way of getting started because it's available on ArcGIS Online, and it's, I would say, quite intuitive. It's really good for ingesting and for analyzing your feeds. So let's take a look. In our case, we have an ArcGIS Online, and if I wanted to access Velocity, if it's licensed, it will appear in your waffle menu, much like everything else. And in this waffle menu, once you click on it, what you will be seeing is you'll be taken to a homepage, something like this. There's a lot happening in here, but let's focus specifically on this left-hand panel. This left-hand panel really breaks down what it is like to ingest, analyze, and create and visualize. So first and foremost, we've got the feeds. That's our input. We'll jump into the feeds in just a little bit, but then with those feeds, we can create either a real-time analytic for data that is coming in real time, or a big data analytic if you're collecting to a big data database. And of course, we have a number of possible outputs. And if we were to create a feed, let's start creating a feed. We can click this button, we can go into feeds, but primarily, when this window comes up, I'd like to highlight the fact that, first of all, you have access to ArcGIS. This is part of the ArcGIS system, and so the traditional feature layer is available there immediately. What you might see as something new is a stream layer. Now, a stream layer is an ArcGIS web layer that streams data, but doesn't necessarily record it. We do also have other options. You can connect to your cloud databases. You can connect to a lot of web and messaging feeds. You can even connect to some data providers that are our partners, and the connections are a little bit smoother. And if you ever have any question, and if you're not sure where to go and how to use your feeds, you've always got the help button here, which takes you to the documentation on feeds. And if we were to take a look at getting started with a data provider, you can see we have options of Geotab, Samsara, Verizon, and Waze. Some of you will have encountered ways in a mobile application where it tells you where to go, it builds your route, and it also gives you traffic, it also gives you alerts. What you might not know is that it also allows us to ingest the data that is providing to you on your mobile phones inside Velocity. Now, the URL here you would be pasting if your organization was registered with Waze as a partner, and you would be able to ingest that data. But if you look at the capabilities, you would have alerts, you would have irregularities, you would have just traffic, whether there's traffic building up. You can check and filter what alert you're after. What you will also see is including partner alerts or only partner alerts. So you can start building a feed, you can start building a real-time analytic by using partner data. However, there are other options as well. If we go back to all types of data, what we are going to use today is a web and messaging option. Again, you will see that there are a lot of options in here, and the help button is always available. But today we will be using an HTTP feed. Now, these HTTP feeds come as a polar, as a receiver, and as a simulator. The simulator is actually quite interesting because imagine you already have some sensor data. Imagine something has already occurred and you have logs of it, and you would like to analyze what's happened. You would be able to plug that data into a simulator without having to rely on something happening again in the same way, maybe even preventing something happening again in the same way. For us, we will be using a thing that we made up. We will be using a fictional example, and the URL that I'm pasting here, you will see that that is just a link to my content. In my case, it's a CSV file. In your case, it can be a database, it can be a table, and you can see settings for the field separator because it's a CSV file. I've got a comma in here, and you've got a lot of options in here. As we keep going, what will happen is it will start taking a look at my CSV file, and it will automatically detect all of the fields and the schema that are part of this CSV file. What this will allow me to do is just take a look at the fields, and it will let me know what's inside. So in here, as you can see what has just appeared, not only am I seeing the fields, I'm also seeing what data is coming in. So you can see I've got the vehicle X and a vehicle Y position. I can see the data format. I can check that the data format is coming in as I'm expecting it to be. You can see the fact that I've got a vehicle ID here. And as we click next, what we have here is a location type. And if as I've seen just now, I have my location type as your X and your Y. So there we go. We have got a Y field and we have got an X field. And we can enter spatial reference. There are a lot of them. So all I can do is just start typing WGS 1984, and we're looking at the world Mercator here. You can take a look at your feed to figure out the right system. It may be in the metadata of the feed that is coming in. If you had date and time, you will be able to add date and time fields. You also have a track ID, which basically just identifies the thing that is tracking. And in our case, that's vehicle ID. And all that's left to do is click next. What this will do is it will now offer you to create this feed, and you may recognize this because this form is very similar to the form that you would be seeing creating any other item in your ArcGIS Online. And this feed will indeed appear in your ArcGIS Online as an item, shareable to a group, for example. I would always recommend give your feeds titles, descriptive titles, add in the summaries, because you will remember this now. Will you remember this a year on? But today, I've already pre-made one. So let's take a look at a real-time analytic. Now, these real-time analytics are a very convenient way of taking your feed and doing more than just visualizing it. We may be needing to do some things to it. For example, you saw that our feed is coming in the WGS transformation. So let's do something about it, shall we? As I click on the real-time, we see some analytics that I've already got, and I can create a real-time analytic from there. You can see I can create it from an existing feed. We've just created that existing feed. That existing feed is the e-bike simulation feed. I can confirm that, and what happens is it's brought in on the screen with me here. What I would now like to do is I would like to reproject this data because we're in the UK. I want this to be coming in a UK British National Grid format. However, I have a lot of folders. All of these folders have a lot of tools. I don't want to have to learn and know where all of these are. So all I need to do is start typing in the search bar. And what will come up is the project tool. I click on it and it appears. I drag it. I connect the two nodes and you can see there's a connection that's been made. And now it's asking me, what am I reprojecting to? Again, all I need to do here is start typing British National Grid. Here we are, and apply that. What you will still see, however, is the fact that there is a warning sign that tells me no outbound connections. And that is true, because now we need to output that analytic somewhere. And if I go into my outputs, you will see I have these options. I can create a feature layer. This feature layer will just write everything that's happened. A stream layer will only keep the latest record. So you will see points moving on a screen, but you can also do emails. You can also do a lot more. For now, we won't go into that. For now, we will be using a stream layer. And as we go to configure it, you will see it also gives us the option to publish a feature layer, and it will keep track of every single occurrence that's happened. And we can also provide a geometry if we wanted to. We're not going to do that. Again, if we wanted to create a stream layer name, I can do something like this. The e-bike feed, British National Grid, and for now, as I mentioned, I'm doing this very briefly, but give yourself a good summary. And once we do that, all that needs to happen, drag it, connect it, and click Create Analytic. It would take some time, but here we can see what happens when this analytic runs. We can see some bikes, some points moving around Cambridge, and if I were to click on one, you will see information coming in. You will see information coming in about the battery level, about the vehicle ID, the speeds, and the type of the vehicle. Now, if you're still not sure what the right real-time thing for you may be, what the right real-time capability, we will have some information coming out, a blog about real-time and what's right for you. But for now, I'm going to hand you over to Ben, who will take you into something a little bit more advanced.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nikita. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, perfect. So as Nikita has just shown you, you can create and start to build up your analytic through a series of nodes and connectors. So to show you some of the extensibility you can achieve with your analytics, here I have a multi-pipeline analytic in ArcGIS Velocity. This analytic is designed for real-time e-bike management. So in this hypothetical scenario, ArcGIS Velocity is being used to oversee a citywide shared mobility program. Now, there are several common operational challenges in running a shared mobility program that requires real-time monitoring, alerting, and responses. Operators need continuous visibility over bike locations to ensure they remain within designated service areas and are readily available for users. Battery levels need to be actively monitored, and speed limits need to be enforced within certain areas, like pedestrianised areas. And overall, users and the workforce must be notified of these key events as they happen. So with ArcGIS Velocity, we can ingest live location data, process it in real time, and trigger alerts or updates as these conditions change. Now, I know particularly if you haven't used ArcGIS Velocity before, looking at an analytic like this can be quite intimidating, but really it can be broken down into three core stages. So here we have ingest, these are our inputs. Then we have analyze, and so these are our processes. And then finally, we have our outputs, and in this case, these are our alerts. So let's go through this step by step. First, ingest. So this is where we bring in our live data. So here we start with the analytic which we saw Nikita's just set up, which includes that fictional bike IoT data and the project node. Then we have analyze. And so this is about applying our business logic. So once we have that live data, we analyze it through those multiple processes, apply that logic, and it helps us to overcome those operational challenges. Now, it's worth noting that although I'm going to go through this analytic through A to B to C, putting it together certainly wasn't like that. It was an iterative process of trying something, going back, trying something new, and testing it again. And I think that's one thing that's really powerful about ArcGIS Velocity, is that its user interface really allows for that process of testing parameters, trying different nodes, seeing what works, and trying it again, all whilst being relatively no or low code. Now, let's start here with our speed enforcement. So here we have a speed limit zone layer, which defines areas where bikes are not allowed to exceed certain speeds. So in pedestrianised areas, for example. This layer is then connected to a filter by geometry node with our bikes feed. And here we're using a spatial relationship of intersect to only consider bikes which are in those speed restricted areas. For bikes in those areas, we then trigger a HTTP alert to an external IoT device on the bike to limit the speed of those bikes. Next, we have battery level monitoring. So this battery level warning filter identifies bikes with low battery levels. So here I'm using a filter by expression node, and it's defined by a simple arcade expression to identify batteries which have a level less than 50. For bikes which have a battery level less than that value, we are then triggering a AWS SNS notification to send a push notification to the rider, advising them to return their bikes back to the station. Next, we have our operational area geofencing. So to ensure our bikes stay within the designated operational area, we're using geofencing logic with the operations zone layer here. So first we have a filter by geometry node, and this uses a spatial relationship of exit. And this filters for bikes which exit our geofence. Now, you might have noticed that we do have some extra parameters here in compared to our previous filtered by geometry node. And that's because when the spatial relationship is set to enter or exit, the tool will operate in a stateful manner. This enables it to compare sequential observations to one another to detect a change in state. And so it does that by keeping a memory cache of observations. The time window parameter here is how often that memory cache is then cleared. Now, whilst this is happening, we also have our operation zone layer and bike feed connect to a detect incidents node. Now, the detect incidents nodes is a tool which evaluates features based on a set of open and closing conditions. So when an open condition is met, an incident is started. So here our open condition is a spatial relationship of exit. And then once it is satisfied, the status is then considered ongoing all the way until our close condition is satisfied, which here is enter. So when the bike re-enters into the bike zone layer. Now, the detect incidents tool, with the detect incidents tool, open and closing conditions can be spatial, temporal, attribute, or any combination of those three. Now, because it monitors an ongoing state of incidents, it is always a stateful tool. So again, here we have that target time window parameter. And this also means that the detect incidents tool has an output layer, and the schema for this layer contains incident ID, status, and duration. Now, if we have a look at this next filter by expression node here, you can see that I've made use of this incident duration field to filter out incidents that have lasted longer than 300,000 milliseconds or 5 minutes. For incidents that have lasted longer than that, we then have an output node which will then send a text message to our workforce, notifying them of the bike which has left the operational area. Now, finally, we have the part of our analytic which tracks the number of bikes available at each bike location. So again, for this, I'm using a detect incidents node, which can be used to start an incident when a bike enters a station, and then end when one exits. This is our way of tracking the number of bikes in each station at any given time. And so there it is, a multi-pipeline real-time analytic, which can help us manage our e-bike sharing operation. The analytic I've just gone through here demonstrates how ArcGIS Velocity can support multiple alerting formats, including our HTTP alerts to external systems. We have AWS SNS notifications, and also workforce messaging. This highlights the flexibility of Velocity in integrating with other communication channels to deliver real-time insights where they're needed. But alerting is just one piece of the puzzle. the key takeaway here is that ArcGIS Velocity isn't working in isolation. It can be integrated with a wider operational workflow, ingesting feeds and sending outputs to other enterprise systems. This processed data can also be visualized and integrated with other ArcGIS products, such as ArcGIS Dashboards, to provide a real-time geographic view of your operations. So let's have a look at what that might look like. So to demonstrate this, here I have a duplicated copy of the analytic I've just walked through, but I've replaced all the output nodes to be feature layers instead. Now, as you can see from the green square on our input feed, the feed is running. And as you can see from these animated connectors, our real-time analytic is also running. And so it will be generating real-time insights into these feature layers, which can then be brought into a dashboard. And that might look something like this here. So here is the dashboard, which provides a real-time operational view of Ben's bikes. On the map here, we have our live bike locations, which we can see riding around and updating as we have new data coming in. We then also have our geofencing layers. So our operational zone is this red boundary around here. And then we have our pedestrianised areas represented by the purpley colour. And then if we zoom in, we can also see the bike stations here represented in yellow. To the side, we also have charts and indicators to provide further insights into our bikes. So here we can see that there are 41 bikes currently with a low battery level, and you can see the IDs of those bikes. We then have 5 that have been speed limited, and you can see these bikes and the speeds underneath. And then we can see the current bikes in operation and also the bike station statistics. And so by combining these real-time data processing, automated alerting, and seamless integration of visualization tools like Dashboard, ArcGIS Velocity enables organizations not just to monitor operations, but actively respond to events as they unfold. And so with that, I'm going to hand back to Claudia, who's going to wrap up for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. Let me just share my screen again. Brilliant. Hopefully that's coming through okay. Thank you so much, Nikita and Ben, for those brilliant demonstrations, really showcasing kind of what can be done with real-time in ArcGIS. And now, obviously, we focused quite a bit there on ArcGIS Velocity, but as we mentioned at the start, there are a whole heap of different ArcGIS products that can carry out and can work with real-time data in ArcGIS. So we've got a variety of resources that we're linking in the follow-up email that do go into further detail with other products that you can see on screen at the moment. So definitely make sure to have a look at those in the follow-up email. Just before we jump to the Q&A, just one final thing to say is we would love for you to join us again on next month's webinar. So our next month is the first ArcGIS update of 2025. So for those who haven't joined these webinars before, really they're a great way to understand the latest updates and the latest changes that have come to ArcGIS, and we'll run through all of those different capabilities that have recently come in. And there is a ArcGIS Online update planned for the 26th of February. So hopefully lots of exciting capabilities and features that we're going to be able to show you in this March webinar. So it'll be great to see you there. But now we'll jump into the Q&A, and so I'm going to be joined back by Nikita and Ben, and Ryan is also going to support us with this Q&A. So thank you so much for everyone who has been sending in your questions throughout the webinar. Please do, you can see the details there. If you've got any further questions, keep popping them in, and we will get to as many of them as we can. So just starting from the top, really, I can see one that's been upvoted quite a lot, really, on where can we find a list of feeds available in the UK, for the UK in the Living Atlas. A lot of them appear to be for the US. So it is a great question, and happy to say that we've actually got some resources in the follow-up email specifically for this. So we've got a couple of blogs, which I'll point you to in the follow-up email, firstly around how you can actually localize the Living Atlas live feeds, whether it's through kind of filtering the data by spatial extent or various different tips and tricks like that. But there is also a blog for a UK live weather data that's also in the Living Atlas. So in that blog, you can find more about that data set, as well as the link to actually having a look at it for yourself. So both of those blogs will be in the email that you'll get after this webinar. So definitely have a look at them there. Brilliant. So next up, Ryan, I can see you've got a couple of questions. So is ArcGIS Velocity available under a creator license?
Hi guys. Yep. So the short answer is no, but the reason for that is that ArcGIS Velocity is licensed at an organizational level. It's not not specific to like named users, as it were, and that's because it's a sort of cloud native premium service add-on for ArcGIS Online, and it comes in 3 different license types: standard, advanced, and dedicated, and those will be linked to the entire ArcGIS Online organization. However, as an organizational admin, if you on the call are an organizational admin, you can manage permissions of your users in your organization. If you do have an ArcGIS Velocity subscription, then you can manage users to have access and the ability to publish feeds, real-time analytics, and big data analytics. Hopefully that answers your question there. I think I've got the next question as well. So is there a charge for the data processing within ArcGIS Velocity? It looks similar to data pipelines, and you get charged an extortionate amount of credits there. So no, there isn't any charge for extra data processing in ArcGIS Velocity in that sense. There are limits within the subscription that or the license of Velocity that you take out. Those are within the sort of licensing area on the documentation page on the website. But basically, the storage capacity and the amount of running or live feeds and analytics are all depending on your sort of Velocity license type. But from my experience working with customers, I've worked with customers with dedicated licenses as well as standard licenses, and it just depends on the requirement that you need in your organization. Just a point note, additional information: advanced dedicated licenses can be augmented with additional add-on compute and storage units if that's required. However, just a point that once storage is added, it can't be removed. So that would be sort of a permanent add-on to your license on there. I think, Claudia, you've got the next question.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. So the next one, what facilities exist in vanilla ArcGIS? I've not heard of that term before, but essentially what real-time ingesting live feed capabilities are there outside of Velocity? So I guess that kind of links back to one of the last slides that I showed with those additional products that we do have. I'm also going to link there's a blog again in the follow-up email about the different real-time offerings that we have. It does talk about Velocity. It does talk about GeoEvent, which is a similar service to Velocity but runs on Enterprise. But there is also things such as notebooks. So you would be able to create your own kind of bespoke, I guess, ingestion mechanism for your real-time data using a notebook. You could, it depends how kind of frequently you want your real-time or your near real-time data to update. You could use Pro for that as well, but I'll link that blog in the follow-up email, because it does kind of depend in terms of what specific kind of ingestion capabilities you're after, but there absolutely are other capabilities beyond just Velocity, but it's dependent on the kind of the frequency and the type of ingestion that you're after there. So hopefully the blog that we'll link is going to be useful for helping you understand which might work for you. Looking at the next question, Nikita, so is there any plan to bring Velocity to Enterprise on-premise at all?
Oh, yeah. Yes, so the plans exist, work is happening in that direction, but at the moment there's no timelines for it. But for now, as Claudia mentioned, you've got the GeoEvent server as well, so that is always an option for while we're waiting for Velocity to come to Enterprise.
Fab, thank you, Nikita. Okay, so apart from Waze, does Velocity link to systems like Google Maps or Apple products? Ryan, are you happy to answer that one?
Yep. So the answer there is not directly, no. So it does depend on what you're trying to achieve, though. So obviously, you may have seen recently in one of the Velocity updates last year that they included the sort of Waze feed types, ingestion types. Now, those aren't necessarily new. We've been able to, or you've been able to ingest data through Waze for, well, pretty much since Velocity's been a live environment and a live product. However, it's just a slightly more easy to use endpoint. So in terms of your question about Google Maps and Apple products, I mean, we do have the HTTP polar and HTTP receiver ingestion feed types. They're kind of a Swiss Army knife, really. They're kind of designed to allow you to connect to as many different APIs as possible within ArcGIS Velocity. So it does kind of depend on what your URL or endpoint is that you would like to access the data from, but those would be the best bet.
Brilliant, thank you, Ryan. And I think, are you happy to answer that? So do users need a license to use content from Velocity, or is it only required for the builder? So I'm guessing for the analytics, what
Yep.
they're asking there.
Yep. So as long as your user is a named user in your organization and the sort of data shared with them as you would with any ArcGIS online content, then no, you can use that content within your applications if you're building them. However, a point on that is that the current release of ArcGIS Velocity, you can't share content outside of your ArcGIS Online organization at the moment. So that includes public.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so next question is where is ArcGIS Velocity? So it doesn't seem to be under our available apps. I think Ryan might have kind of alluded to this earlier, but Nikita, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that first port of call is make sure that it is licensed. If it is licensed, but it doesn't appear under the waffle menu, if you scroll down in the waffle menu at the very, very bottom of it, there will be a show more button. And sometimes an application that is licensed but isn't appearing in the core waffle menu might come up there as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Where are the recordings for previous webinars? So you can find them on our events page. So if you wanted to just Google Esri UK events, you'll find it. But it is also, again, going to be a link in the follow-up email. So you can head over there and you'll see both industry webinars and technology webinars, and you've got all the recordings there. Brilliant, okay. Are there any plans to allow updates to the feature service when using join views, as currently the schema of the feature service gets locked when using a join? So I strongly encourage with this to make use of the Esri community site. So product teams really use any ideas that come in from the users to be able to kind of shape future updates. I have found a similar idea linking to this already on an Esri community site. So I'll leave this question here on the Q&A, and I'll add the link into as a comment of that question so that you can kind of upvote that idea on Esri community. That's the best thing I can kind of encourage you to do with that one. Next up, so I'd be interested to know if there are any real-world examples of velocity use with renewable energy sites, e.g. wind or solar. Ryan?
Yeah, so I had to do a bit of digging in the background for that one for you, whoever asked that question, but there's some really good resources on directly through Esri Inc. There's a couple of webinars on renewable energy and real-time renewable energy workflows of ArcGIS Velocity. And I think it'd be quite a good idea for me to maybe link that. It's a YouTube link, whether I can link that in your question for you, so you can have a direct access to that. It's quite a long one. I haven't had the time to sit through the whole video to give you a nice answer on that. So hopefully that could be something you could do and check that out.
Brilliant, thank you, Ryan. We're running out of time really, but if we just try get to a couple more. Nikita, I can see you've got a question ready to go with we go on sites with more people if the site is bigger. Is there a way using field maps to see where other people from our company are?
Yes. So if you've got a mobile worker, they will have the ability to share their location, and they will come up, the feeds from their location will come up in your organization in a format called tracks. Those tracks, essentially, they're like a special type of feature layer, and they will appear in your content. You can add them to a map, and then you can either allow your workers to see that map in field maps, for example, or you can surface that through dashboards. The caveat there is your workers have to enable that themselves. You can, or they have to enter a map in field maps to enable that location sharing. There is no automatic sharing of location without everybody's consent involved. But it will show everybody that you need to see. Yes.
Thank you, Nikita. So we're overrunning a little bit now, so we'll do one more question. And Ben, I can see you've got one ready to go. So once you feed the data, how frequent is the real-time data update?
Right, so it depends. The ingestion speed does depend on the type of license you have, whether it's standard, advanced, or dedicated. So it can range from up to 25 kilobits per second of ingestion for your standard, up to 2,500 kilobits per second and higher for dedicated. When it comes to bringing in that ingested data into something like Map Viewer, the update rate for your layers might be something between 0.1 seconds for a stream layer, or for a minimum of 0.5 seconds for a feature layer. So there is a difference between sort of visualizing that and ingesting it, but for ingestion it can be anywhere up to and higher than 2,500 kilobits per second.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. I think we're going to have to leave it there. So sorry for the questions that we haven't got to. We got through as many as we can in the time, but all that's left to say now really is thank you so much for joining. Thank you to our presenters as well for their time today, and hopefully we'll see you in next month's webinar. Have a good day. Thank you.